I counted every single shot. 1, 2, 3. By the fourth one, her screaming stopped. By the ninth one, the only sound left on that rainy highway was the hum of the engine and the laughter of the man holding the smoking gun. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just memorized his face. That sheriff's badge on his chest didn't shine like a symbol of justice. It looked like a target. He thought he was killing a witness. He didn't know he was waking up a war machine. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The night it happened, the rain was coming down so hard the windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle. It was a rhythmic thump swish that usually put me to sleep, but tonight, I was wide awake. I was driving, and my wife, Tessa, was in the passenger seat with her hand resting on her stomach. She was 7 months pregnant. We were arguing about paint colors for the nursery. She wanted sage green, and I wanted ocean blue. It was the kind of stupid, small argument you have when your life is perfect, when you think you have all the time in the world. Mason, seriously. Tessa laughed, turning to look at me, her eyes catching the reflection of the dashboard lights. If we paint that room blue, the baby is going to think he lives in an aquarium. I smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. He's going to be a Navy SEAL like his dad, Tess. He needs to get used to the water. She rolled her eyes, but she squeezed my hand back. That was the last time I felt her warmth. That was the last time my life made sense. Behind us, red and blue lights exploded in the rearview mirror. I sighed, checking the speedometer. I was doing 40 in a 45. Must be a busted taillight. I muttered, easing the truck onto the gravel shoulder of that desolate stretch of Highway 4. Be nice, Tessa whispered. Don't give them the tough guy attitude. I shut off the engine and rolled down the window. The smell of wet pine and asphalt flooded the cab. I watched the side mirror. A spotlight hit me, blindingly bright, calibrated to disorient. I squinted, instinctively analyzing the approach. 2 men, one staying back by the cruiser, hand on his holster. The other approaching my door, moving with a swagger that didn't match standard procedure. When the flashlight beam moved away from my eyes, I saw him. Sheriff Grant. I didn't know his name then, but I would learn it. I would carve it into my memory. He was a big man, thick-necked, with a uniform that looked too tight and eyes that looked too dead. License and registration, he said. No, good evening. No, do you know why I pulled you over? Just a demand. Evening, officer, I said, keeping my hands on the wheel, 10 and 2. Standard protocol. Is there a problem? Step out of the vehicle, Grant ordered. His voice was flat, metallic. Sir, I have my pregnant wife in the car. It's pouring rain. If this is about a ticket, I said step out of the vehicle. Now, his hand went to his gun. My training kicked in. Threat assessment. The rookie back at the cruiser, name tag Kyle, looked nervous. He was shifting his weight, looking up and down the empty highway. Grant, though? Grant looked eager. I opened the door and stepped out, hands raised. I'm complying. I'm active duty Navy, Chief Petty Officer Mason. I don't give a damn what you are, Grant spat. He spun me around, slamming my face into the wet metal of my truck. My cheekbone cracked against the door frame. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. I yelled, tasting blood. Mason. Tessa screamed from inside the car. I heard her seatbelt click. Stay in the car, Tess. I shouted, but it was too late. Grant kicked my legs apart and slapped zip ties onto my wrists, cinching them so tight they cut off the circulation immediately. He shoved me down onto the muddy gravel. The cold water soaked through my jeans instantly. What is this? I growled, trying to keep the rage out of my voice. You have no probable cause. Grant ignored me. He walked around to the passenger side. Tessa had opened her door. She was standing there in the rain, one hand on her belly, the other shielding her eyes from the spotlight. She looked so small. Please, she said, her voice trembling. My husband, he hasn't done anything. We're just going home. Grant looked her up and down. A slow, sickening smile spread across his face. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a predator finding a wounded animal. Going home, Grant repeated. He looked back at Deputy Kyle. Clear the road, Kyle. Make sure no one's coming. Kyle hesitated. Sheriff, maybe we should just book him, and I gave you an order, Deputy. Grant barked. Kyle turned his back. He looked away. That coward turned his back on a pregnant woman. Grant turned back to Tessa. He didn't pull a taser. He didn't pull handcuffs. He pulled his service pistol, a Glock 17. Time seemed to slow down. In combat, they call it tachypsychia. The brain processes information faster than reality can keep up. I saw the raindrops bouncing off the slide of the gun. I saw Tessa's eyes go wide, the realization hitting her a split second before the bullet did. No, I roared, thrashing against the mud, trying to get my legs under me. Bang! The first shot hit her in the shoulder. She spun around, crashing against the side of the truck. Tessa! I screamed, a sound that tore my throat apart. Grant stepped closer. He wasn't rushing. He was taking his time. Bang! Bang! Two more. Tessa slid down the door, leaving a streak of red on the white paint. She curled around her stomach, trying to protect our unborn son. She was trying to be a mother even while she was dying. I was on my knees, screaming, fighting the zip ties until my wrists were raw and bleeding, but I couldn't move. I was 20 feet away. I might as well have been on the moon. Grant stood over her. He looked at me. He looked right into my eyes. And he winked. He aimed down at her stomach. Bang! 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 9 shots. The slide locked back. Empty. Silence rushed back in, deafening and heavy. The rain washed the blood down the driveway, pooling around my knees. I couldn't breathe. My heart had stopped beating the moment hers did. Grant holstered his weapon. He walked over to me, grabbed me by the hair, and leaned close to my ear. He smelled like peppermint and gunpowder. You went for my gun, he whispered. Tragic accident. Veteran snaps, kills wife, attacks officer. That's the story. He kicked me in the temple. The world went black. When I opened my eyes, everything was white. Blinding, sterile white. The smell of antiseptic replaced the smell of rain. There was a steady beeping sound to my left. I tried to move my hand to rub my eyes, but metal clinked against metal. I was handcuffed to the hospital bed. Panic surged through me. Tessa! Nurse! I tried to yell, but it came out as a croak. My throat was dry as sand. The door opened. It wasn't a nurse. It was a man in a cheap suit, holding a clipboard. He looked tired. You're awake, he said, not looking at me. I'm your public defender. Name's Oliver. Don't say anything yet. Where is she? I rasped. Where is my wife? Oliver pulled a chair over and sat down. He looked at me with pity. I hated him for it. Pity is useless. Pity doesn't fix anything. Mason, he said softly. Your wife? Tessa didn't make it. The baby didn't make it either. I stared at the ceiling tiles. I knew it. I saw it happen. But hearing it out loud made it final. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my lungs. I closed my eyes and hot tears leaked out. Who? I asked. Who did they say did it? Oliver sighed, flipping a page on his clipboard. The police report says you had a psychotic episode. PTSD. It says you pulled a weapon on Sheriff Grant during a routine traffic stop. It says you shot her, Mason. In the struggle. A laugh bubbled up in my chest. A dark, broken, dangerous laugh. They said I shot her? I whispered. The sheriff is a hero in this town, Mason. He claims he had to subdue you. The ballistics report. Well, it's being handled by his department. It's a mess. I stopped crying. The grief was still there, a massive black hole in my stomach. But something else was filling the edges. Something cold. Something sharp. I had spent 22 years in the teams. I had hunted men in the mountains of Afghanistan. I had dismantled terror cells in the Horn of Africa. I knew how insurgents worked. I knew how enemies operated. Sheriff Grant wasn't a cop. He was an enemy combatant. And he had just made a fatal tactical error. Oliver, I said, my voice steady now. The trembling was gone. Yeah. Give me a glass of water. And tell the sheriff I want to see him. Mason, are you crazy? He's the one pinning this on you. You need to stay quiet. I'm not going to talk to him, I said, staring at my reflection in the dark monitor of the heart rate machine. My eyes look different. They look dead. I just want to look him in the eye one more time. I want him to think he won. Oliver shook his head and left the room. I lay back against the pillows. I tested the strength of the handcuffs. Standard issue. I could shim these with a paperclip if I had one. I looked at the 4-needle in my arm. That would work. But not yet. If I ran now, I was just a fugitive. If I ran now, I couldn't clear Tessa's name. I needed them to think I was broken. I needed them to think I was just another washed-up soldier who lost his mind. Because when they think you're broken, they get sloppy. They get arrogant. And when they get arrogant, that's when you strike. The door opened again. It wasn't Oliver. It was Sheriff Grant. He was wearing a fresh uniform. He looked clean. He held a cup of coffee in one hand and smiled that same sickening smile. "Rough night, huh, hero?" Grant said, closing the door behind him. I didn't blink. "You killed her." "I enforced the law," Grant said, stepping closer to the bed. "And you? You're going to spend the rest of your life in a hole, wondering why you couldn't save her." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But don't worry. I'll make sure the house sells for a good price. Nice place you had there. Shame about the blood on the driveway. It's hard to scrub out." He patted my leg, right over the spot where the handcuff was chafing my skin. "Rest up, Mason. The fun is just getting started." He turned and walked out, whistling a tune. I watched the door close. He thought the handcuffs made me helpless. He thought the badge made him safe. He didn't know that he had just locked himself in a cage with a monster. The hospital stay was short. Too short. They didn't keep me there to heal me. They kept me there just long enough to make sure I could survive a jail cell. 2 deputies hauled me out of the bed at 3 a.m., dragged me barefoot across the cold linoleum, and threw me into the back of a cruiser. They didn't speak a word. They didn't have to. The silence was the message. You are nothing. I was processed into the county lockup like a piece of meat. Fingerprints. Mugshot. Strip search. I stood there, naked and shivering under the fluorescent buzz, while a guard with dead eyes tossed me an orange jumpsuit that smelled like mold and stale sweat. I put it on. It was 3 sizes too small. Cell 4. The guard grunted, shoving me down the hallway. I walked with my head down, but my eyes were scanning everything. It's instinct. You spend 22 years in the teams, you don't turn it off. I counted the cameras, for in the booking area, blind spot near the water fountain. I noted the locking mechanism on the doors, electronic maglocks, probably controlled by a central server in the watch commander's office. I looked at the deputies, soft, arrogant, confident. They had no discipline. They were sloppy because they were untouchable. In a weird way, that gave me hope. I sat in that cell for 48 hours. No food, no water, just the sound of other men screaming and the radiator clanking. I didn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on the concrete bunk and replayed the shooting in my head. Frame by frame. The rain. The lights. The smile. The shots. I forced myself to watch Tessa die in my memory 1,000 times. I needed the pain. Pain is fuel. If I let myself feel grief, I would break. If I let myself feel rage, I would make a mistake. So I converted it all into cold, hard data. On the 3rd morning, the heavy steel door buzzed open. "Lawyers here," a deputy spat. They marched me into a small interrogation room. There was a metal table bolted to the floor and a 2-way mirror on the wall. Sitting at the table was the man from the hospital, Oliver. But he wasn't alone. Next to him was a woman. She looked young, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes and a nervous tic. She kept tapping her pen against her legal pad. "I'm Amelia," she said, not offering her hand. "I'm taking over your case. Oliver has a conflict of interest." I looked at Oliver. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was scared. Grant had gotten to him. "What kind of conflict?" I asked, my voice raspy from dehydration. "He plays poker with the sheriff on Tuesdays," Amelia said, her voice low. She glanced at the mirror. She knew they were listening. "I don't play poker, Mason. I just passed the bar exam 6 months ago. Nobody else would take your case. Great, I said dryly. I got the rookie. You got the only person in this building who doesn't think you did it, she shot back. There was fire in her voice. I like that. She opened a file folder. It was thin, too thin for a murder investigation. Here's the situation, she said, leaning in. The dashcam footage from the sheriff's cruiser is missing. Corrupted file, they said. The audio from his body mic. Malfunction due to the rain. And the gun found at the scene. Your gun has your fingerprints on it. I didn't have a gun, I said calmly. It was in the glove box. Locked. They say you reached for it. They say you wrestled with the sheriff. They say you fired wildly and hit your wife. I leaned forward, the chains on my wrists rattling. Amelia, look at me. Do you think a Navy SEAL misses his target at point-blank range and hits his own wife 9 times? She held my gaze. She swallowed hard. No, I don't. The ballistics report is garbage. The trajectory angles don't match a struggle. They match an execution. She lowered her voice to a whisper, covering her mouth with her hand so the cameras couldn't read her lips. But it doesn't matter, Mason. The judge is Grant's cousin. The coroner is his brother-in-law. This isn't a legal system. It's a family business. So what's the play? I asked. They made an offer, she said. She looked sick. Involuntary manslaughter. You plead guilty. 10 years. You'll be out in 5 with good behavior. I plead guilty to killing my wife. I asked, the temperature in the room dropping 10 degrees. I'd rather die. If you go to trial, they will give you the death penalty, Mason. They will fabricate whatever they need to. The door banged open. It wasn't a guard. It was a detective I hadn't seen before. He tossed a piece of paper onto the table. You're free to go, the detective said, looking bored. Amelia blinked. What? DA dropped the charges, he said, picking at his teeth. Insufficient evidence to proceed at this time. Procedural error with the chain of custody on the weapon. Amelia looked at me, confusion written all over her face. That doesn't make sense. They had you nailed. Why would they drop it? I knew why. I stood up slowly. Because a trial brings attention, I said. A trial brings reporters from the city. A trial brings federal oversight if it drags on too long. They don't want a trial. The detective smirked. Don't overthink it, pal. Just get your stuff and get out of my town. They processed me out in 10 minutes. They gave me a plastic bag with my wallet, my keys, and my phone. My clothes were still stained with mud and blood. I put them on anyway. I felt the stiffness of the dried blood on my shirt against my skin. It was a reminder. Amelia walked me to the lobby. Mason, this is a trap, she whispered. They released you so they can handle this, unofficially. If you stay here, you're going to have an accident. I know, I said. I have a cousin in Ohio, she said, digging into her purse. He has a farm. You could go there. Lie low. I looked at her. She was a good kid. She was trying to save me, but she didn't understand what I was. I wasn't a victim anymore. Go home, Amelia, I said gently. Lock your doors. Forget you ever met me. I pushed through the double doors and walked toward the exit. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. Sheriff Grant was standing there. He was alone. He stepped out, blocking my path. He looked huge in that uniform, blotting out the light from the windows. He smelled like coffee and arrogance. You're a lucky man, Mason, he said. I stopped 2 feet from him. I didn't clench my fists. I didn't glare. I just looked at his throat. I visualized the carotid artery. I visualized how much pressure it would take to collapse his windpipe. 3 pounds of pressure. 1 second. Luck had nothing to do with it, I said. Grant chuckled. He leaned in, invading my personal space. You think you're smart? You think you caught a break? He shook his head. I let you walk because I want you to run. I enjoy the chase. It's boring when they just give up. He tapped his badge. You have till sundown to cross the county line. If I see you after dark, well, we have a lot of deer crossings around here. People hit them all the time. Cars crash. Gas tanks explode. Tragedies happen. I looked him dead in the eye. You're right, Sheriff, I said. Tragedies happen. I walked past him. I didn't look back. I stepped out into the blinding afternoon sun. The air was fresh, but it tasted like ash. I walked to the impound lot next door to get my truck. It was still there. The window was busted out. The passenger seat. I couldn't look at the passenger seat. I ripped off the plastic covering they had put over the window and climbed in. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Leave town. That's what a sane man would do. That's what a survivor would do. I reached under the driver's seat. My hand brushed against cold steel. They had searched the truck, stripped it of anything valuable, taken the gun from the glove box. But they didn't check the false bottom under the seat rail. I pulled out a jagged, rusty K-bar knife. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I wasn't leaving town. I was going home. And tonight, I wasn't going to be the one running. Driving back to the house felt like driving into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The sun was setting, casting long, bleeding shadows across the road. Every mile marker was a memory. There was the diner where we had our first date. There was the park where we walked the dogs. And then, there was the stretch of highway where she died. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I drove past the crime scene tape fluttering in the wind, a sick yellow ribbon marking the end of my world. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same. The porch light was on. Tessa always left it on for me. But the silence was deafening. No dog barking. No music playing. Just the hollow, empty stare of dark windows. I stepped out of the truck and my boot crunched on something dry. I looked down. It was a dark stain on the concrete. The rain hadn't washed it all away. I fell to my knees. I couldn't help it. My legs just gave out. I touched the cold concrete, my fingers tracing the dark spot. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Tess." For 5 minutes, I was just a man. A broken husband sobbing in his driveway. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness swallowed the yard, the weeping stopped. The Navy SEAL in me woke up. "Get up, Mason. Grieving is a luxury. You don't have luxuries anymore. You have a mission." I stood up, wiped my face, and unlocked the front door. The air inside was stale. It smelled like her vanilla candles and laundry detergent. I walked through the living room, not turning on any lights. I didn't want the neighbors to know I was back. I moved like a ghost in my own home. I went straight to the kitchen. I grabbed a trash bag and started sweeping the counters. Mail, receipts, photos, everything went into the bag. I wasn't cleaning, I was sanitizing. If I was going to war with the police department, I couldn't leave anything they could use against me. No leverage. I went upstairs to the nursery. This was the hardest part. The room was half-painted. The crib was assembled in the corner, empty. A mobile with little plush whales hung over it, still. I took a deep breath, forcing the air into my lungs. Focus. I knelt down beside the crib. Tessa was smart. Smarter than me in a lot of ways. She had a feeling something was wrong weeks ago. She had told me once, joking but not really. "If anything ever happens, check the baby's room." I ran my hand under the mattress support of the crib. Nothing. I checked the changing table. Nothing. Then I saw it. A loose floorboard under the rocking chair. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but the dust pattern was disturbed. I pried it up with my knife. Inside was a small, velvet pouch. I opened it. A burner phone. A cheap, prepaid Nokia. And a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I unfolded the note. It was Tessa's handwriting. "Mason, if you're reading this, I'm terrified. I found something in the bank statements. Julian asked for money again. A lot of it. I told him no, but he said he was in trouble with bad people. He said the sheriff was involved. He said if I didn't pay, they would hurt us. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd go after them. I thought I could handle it. I'm sorry. I love you. Julian." The air left the room. Julian was her brother. My brother-in-law. The man I had beers with every Sunday. The man who helped me build the deck in the backyard. The man who was going to be the godfather to our son. He sold us out. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. The betrayal hit me harder than the sheriff's boot. It wasn't just corruption, it was family. Julian had fed us to the wolves to save his own skin. I turned on the burner phone. One text message in the outbox, sent 10 minutes before we got in the car that night. 2. Unknown number. We're leaving the house now. Heading toward Route 4. I'm sorry. Please just scare him. Don't hurt her. He gave them our location. He gave them the route. I put the phone in my pocket. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I went perfectly still. This was the clarity I needed. Before, I was fighting a system. Now, I had a target. I went to the master bedroom closet. I pushed aside the hanging clothes and put my hand against the back wall. I pressed the hidden latch I had installed years ago. The panel clicked open. Inside was my safe. I spun the dial. Left to 22. Right to 45. Left to 10. The heavy door swung open. Sheriff Grant thought he had disarmed me. He took the Glock from the truck. He thought that was it. He didn't know about the stash. I pulled out the black duffel bag. I unzipped it. Inside lay my past life. A customized SIG Sauer P226 with a threaded barrel. 3 spare magazines. A K-bar combat knife. A roll of duct tape. A set of lockpicks. And a tactical vest. I stripped off my civilian clothes. I put on black cargo pants, a black thermal shirt, and heavy boots. I strapped the holster to my thigh. I checked the action on the SIG, CHK. Smooth. I looked in the mirror. The man looking back wasn't Mason the husband. He wasn't Mason the father-to-be. He was operator 4-1. A ghost. A cleaner. I had work to do. But I couldn't go straight for Grant. Grant was the king. You don't attack the king while the castle walls are still up. You take out the pawns first. You make the king nervous. You make him paranoid. I thought about the rookie deputy. Kyle. The one who turned his back while my wife was murdered. The one who shook. The one who looked like he wanted to vomit. He was the weak link. I grabbed the burner phone and dialed the number for Kyle that I had memorized from the police report I glanced at on Amelia's desk. It rang 3 times. Hello. A shaky voice answered. I didn't say anything. I just held the phone up to the mobile in the nursery. I spun the little whales. They made a soft, twinkling lullaby sound. Ting, ting, ting. Who is this? Kyle's voice pitched up. Is this a joke? I stopped the mobile. She says hello, Kyle. I whispered. I hung up. I grabbed the duffel bag and walked out the back door. I didn't lock it. I wouldn't be coming back here. This house was a tomb now. I slipped into the woods behind my property. The rain had started again. Good. The rain covers sound. The rain washes away tracks. I moved through the trees, heading toward the residential district where the deputies lived. I knew where Kyle lived. I knew where all of them lived. Small towns are like that. Everyone knows everything. Tonight, the education of Deputy Kyle was about to begin. Lesson 1. Terror. The rain was my ally. It masked the sound of my boots on the pavement as I moved through the sleeping subdivision. This was the safe part of town. Manicured lawns, American flags on porches, security system signs planted in the flower beds. It was where the people who enforced the law lived, thinking they were untouchable in their little fortress of badges and brotherhood. I stopped at the edge of the tree line, staring at a small, yellow ranch-style house. A patrol car was parked in the driveway, Unit 402. Deputy Kyle's car. The house was dark, except for the flickering blue light of a TV in the living room. I didn't go to the front door. That's for guests. I went to the back. I vaulted the 6-foot wooden fence in one fluid motion, landing silently in the wet grass. A dog barked 2 houses down, but I froze, blending into the shadows of the tool shed until it settled. I approached the back door. Locked. Standard deadbolt. I pulled out my lockpicks, a tension wrench, and a rake. I had spent hours practicing this in the teams, picking locks in the dark, underwater, under fire. This cheap hardware store lock was an insult. Click. I turned the knob slowly. The door whined, a hinge needing oil. I timed the opening with a clap of thunder overhead. I was inside. The air smelled like stale pizza and lemon cleaner. I moved through the kitchen, avoiding the squeaky floorboards I had identified just by looking at the warping wood. I crept down the hallway. I saw him. Kyle was asleep on the couch, still in his uniform pants, a half-empty beer bottle on the coffee table. The TV was playing an infomercial on mute. His gun belt was draped over a chair 5 feet away. Sloppy. Disgraceful. I could have ended him right there. A quick twist of the neck. A blade to the throat. It would be easy. But death was too good for him. I needed him to suffer. I needed him to be the carrier of a message. I moved to the chair and picked up his service weapon. A Glock 17. The same model Grant used. I popped the magazine out, ejected the round from the chamber, and placed the bullets in a neat row on the coffee table. Then, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a single, spent 9mm casing. I had found it caught in the wiper well of my truck. One of the casings that killed my wife. I placed the casing gently on his chest, right over his heart. I leaned in close to his ear. "Tick-tock, Kyle," I whispered. He stirred, grunting in his sleep. I backed away, fading into the kitchen shadows just as he jerked awake. "Huh." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Who's there?" He looked around the empty room. The TV flickered. Then he saw it. He saw his gun dismantled on the table. He saw the row of bullets. And then he looked down at his chest. He picked up the casing. His hands started to shake. Violent, uncontrollable shaking. "Oh God," he whimpered. "Oh God, no." He scrambled for his phone, dropping it twice before he dialed. "Sheriff. Sheriff, pick up," he screamed into the receiver. He was here. He was in my house. I was outside by then, crouched under the open window, listening. "Mason. It's Mason." Kyle was hyperventilating. He left a casing, "Sheriff?" on my chest. He could have killed me. A pause. Grant was yelling on the other end. "I don't know where he is." Kyle cried. "I'm going to the safe house. I can't stay here. I'm going to the farm." "The farm?" "Bingo. Yeah, the one on Old Mill Road," Kyle said, wiping snot from his nose. "Dominic is there, right?" "I'm going. I'm bringing the files. I'm not taking the fall for this, Grant." He hung up and started throwing clothes into a bag. I smiled in the darkness. It wasn't just a safe house. It was a command center. The farm on Old Mill Road. That's where they kept the dirty money. That's where they kept the records. That's where Dominic, the enforcer, was. Kyle ran out the front door, jumping into his patrol car. He peeled out of the driveway, sirens off, but lights flashing. I didn't follow him immediately. I didn't need to. I knew where he was going. I walked back to the woods where I had stashed an old dirt bike I had borrowed from a neighbor's shed 2 miles back. It was noisy but fast. I pushed the bike through the trails until I was far enough away to start it. The engine roared to life. I flipped down my night vision monocular. The world turned into shades of green and black. I wasn't hunting a deer anymore. I was hunting a pack of wolves. And I was going to skin them one by one. The farm was 5 miles out of town, isolated, surrounded by cornfields. Perfect for hiding bodies. Perfect for a siege. I rode hard, the wind biting my face. I thought about Tessa. I thought about the fear she must have felt in those last moments. Kyle was scared now. Good. Fear makes you stupid. Fear makes you run to your friends. And when you run to your friends, you lead the enemy right to the nest. I killed the engine a mile from the target. I hid the bike in a drainage ditch and covered it with branches. I moved the rest of the way on foot. The farm was a compound. A main house, a large barn, and high fences. There were floodlights on the corners. I lay on my stomach in the tall grass, scanning the perimeter with my thermal scope. Heat signatures. 2 on the porch. Rifles. 1 patrolling the fence line with a dog. And inside the house, movement. I saw a car pull up. Kyle's cruiser. He ran inside, carrying a briefcase. I checked my gear. My knife. My pistol. My anger. I wasn't going to knock. I crawled forward, slipping through the mud. The dog handler was coming my way. The dog, a German shepherd, perked its ears up. It smelled me. It started to bark. The guard stopped. "What is it, boy?" I held my breath. I became a stone. The guard shone his flashlight into the field. The beam passed over my head, inches away. "Probably just a raccoon," he muttered, pulling the dog away. "Mistake." As soon as he turned, I moved. Fast. Silent. I came up behind him. I didn't use the gun. Too loud. I clamped my hand over his mouth and drove the knife into the soft spot between his collarbone and neck. He went limp without a sound. I gently lowered him to the ground. The dog looked at me, confused. I put a finger to my lips. "Shoo," I whispered. The dog didn't bark. It just whined and licked my hand. Even the dog knew I wasn't the bad guy here. One down. I looked at the house. The lights were on. They were arguing inside. I could hear Grant's voice on a speakerphone. I crept toward the barn. I needed a distraction. I needed chaos. And I knew exactly how to start a fire. The barn smelled of diesel and dry hay, a pyromaniac's dream. I slipped inside through a side door that was hanging off its hinges. My thermal scope picked up no heat signatures inside. It was empty of people, but full of something else. Rows of luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, a vintage Porsche. All with out-of-state plates. This wasn't just a place to hide dirty money. It was a chop shop. This was how Grant funded his little empire. He wasn't just shaking down locals. He was running an interstate theft ring. I found a row of gas cans against the wall. I grabbed two. I poured a trail of gasoline from the back of the barn toward the entrance. The fumes were dizzying, but I focused. I needed this to be big. I needed it to look like hell had opened up. I lit a flare. The red phosphorus hissed, casting long, dancing shadows on the stolen cars. "Burn," I whispered. I tossed the flare. The gas caught instantly. A whoosh of heat slammed into me as the fire raced up the walls. I sprinted out the back door just as the first window blew out from the pressure. I circled around to the side of the main house, crouching behind a stack of firewood. Fire! The barn's on fire, someone screamed from inside. The back door of the house flew open. Two men ran out, the guards from the porch. They were panicking, running toward the inferno with fire extinguishers that looked like toys against the growing blaze. That left the house exposed. I moved. I slipped through the open back door into the mudroom. I could hear shouting from the living room. "Forget the cars. Get the files." It was a deep, gravelly voice. "Dominic, the enforcer. We have to go. He's here." That was Kyle. He sounded like he was crying. I stepped into the hallway. The floorboards creaked. Dominic spun around. He was a mountain of a man, covered in tattoos, holding a shotgun. I didn't let him finish. I raised my SIG fut-fut. 2 shots. One to his right shoulder, one to his right knee. Dominic roared and dropped the shotgun, collapsing to the floor. Kyle shrieked and scrambled backward, tripping over a coffee table. He crab-walked into the corner, holding his briefcase like a shield. "Don't kill me. Please, don't kill me." Kyle sobbed. I ignored him. I walked over to Dominic, who was groaning and trying to reach for a pistol in his waistband with his good arm. I kicked him in the face. His head snapped back, and he slumped against the wall, dazed but conscious. I knelt down, pressing the muzzle of my suppressor against his forehead. "The barn is burning, Dominic," I said calmly. "The fire department is 10 minutes away. You have about 2 minutes before this house catches too. Go to hell." Dominic spat, blood bubbling on his lips. "I've been there," I said. "It looks a lot like a highway in the rain." I pressed the gun harder. "Who paid Grant?" I asked. "Who wanted my wife dead? It wasn't just a traffic stop. Kyle told me you were waiting for us." Dominic laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "You think Grant is the boss? Grant is a dog on a leash. He just does what he's told." "Told by who?" "You don't want to know, soldier boy? It'll break your heart." "Try me." Dominic looked at Kyle, then back at me. He grinned, showing bloody teeth. The money came from a gambling debt. A big one. Someone owed the syndicate 50 grand. He offered a trade. He said his sister had a life insurance policy. A big one. $500,000. The room started to spin. "Sister. Name?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Give me the name." "Julian," Dominic whispered. "Julian, whatever his name is. The guy who runs the hardware store. The guy who was at your wedding." I froze. "Julian. My brother-in-law. Tessa's own flesh and blood. He didn't just sell us out to clear a debt. He had us killed for the insurance money." He bet his sister's life on a poker game and lost. I stood up. The rage that filled me wasn't hot anymore. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of cold that shatters steel. You're lying, I said. Check the briefcase. Dominic wheezed, nodding at Kyle. The ledger is in there. Page 4. JP, debt cleared. I looked at Kyle. He threw the briefcase at me. Take it. Just take it and go. I opened it. I flipped to page 4. There it was. In black and white ink. Julian Parker. Debt, $50,000. Payment, asset liquidation, Tessa Mason. Asset liquidation. That's what they called my wife. An asset. I closed the briefcase. I looked down at Dominic. You're right. It did break my heart. I shot him once in the head. He stopped moving. I turned to Kyle. He was curled into a ball, weeping. Get up, I said. Are you going to kill me? He stuttered. No, I said. You're going to be my witness. You're going to drive me to Julian's house. And you're going to tell him exactly what you just heard. I grabbed Kyle by the collar and dragged him out the back door. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames licking the night sky. The sirens were getting closer. I shoved Kyle into the passenger seat of his own cruiser. I zip-tied his hands to the door handle. If you make a sound, I said, starting the engine, I'll leave you in the trunk. We drove away from the fire, heading back toward town, back toward the hardware store, back toward the man I used to call brother. The betrayal was deeper than I thought. It wasn't just corrupt cops. It was rot in the foundation of my family. And the only way to treat rot is to burn it out. The streets were empty, slick with rain and streaked with the glow of streetlights. The wipers dragged back and forth on Kyle's cruiser, smudging the dirt and ash on the glass. He sat tied up beside me, twitching every few seconds, whimpering under his breath. We rolled up to the edge of town. The old Parker hardware sign loomed ahead, flickering, half-dead neon that spat sparks with every surge of electricity. Julian's place sat behind the store. Two-story house. Porch light still on. Like he was waiting for her to walk in the front door again. I killed the engine, but let the lights burn through the rain. The car idled as I watched the house. The curtains moved on the second floor. Someone was standing there, watching right back. You don't have to do this, Kyle blurted. If you tell the sheriff. I slammed the gear into park and turned to him. You still don't get it. The sheriff was the hitman. There's no one to tell. No one clean left. He looked like he wanted to cry again, but he didn't make a sound when I cut the ties on his wrists and pushed my pistol into his side. You're going to walk in there, I said. You're going to tell him the cops are closing in. That Dominic flipped before he burned. And if you say my name, I'll finish what Dominic started, only slower. Kyle nodded violently. I watched him stumble through the rain up to the porch. He hesitated only once before knocking. The door opened. Julian stood there, dressed like he'd just come from bed. Sweatpants, bare feet, panic behind tired eyes. He looked thinner, smaller somehow than I remembered. He and Tessa had the same jawline, the same nervous habit of tucking hair behind their ear even when there wasn't any there. He didn't invite Kyle in. He just yanked him by the collar and dragged him out of sight. I counted to 5 before slipping from the car. I crossed the yard fast, my boots silent in the mud. Through the side window, I saw Julian slamming Kyle against the fridge, shouting words I couldn't hear. Kyle held up his hands like a child caught stealing candy, babbling and nodding. Then Julian stopped, staring at the man like he'd seen a ghost. And maybe he had, because I was already in the doorway. Evening, Julian. He spun. The shock in his eyes wasn't fear at first, it was disbelief. Like his conscience had kept him convinced I was dead along with her. Mason. His voice cracked on it. You. Man. What the hell happened? They said what? I stepped closer. The room smelled like whiskey and dust and old paint. They said I snapped? That I killed my wife. He looked past me, maybe hoping there was still a way out of this conversation. I swear to God, I didn't know they'd. I thought. His voice hitched, his breath unsteady. Sheriff said it was supposed to be a scare. They said you were going to testify about that old corruption case. He made it sound like they'd rough her up, maybe rough you up. I raised my gun and pointed it straight at his chest. Rough her up? Julian. She was 7 months pregnant. My voice came out low, too calm for what I felt inside. Calm is worse. It scares men who expect screaming. His knees buckled slightly. He caught himself on the kitchen chair. I had no choice, Mason. You know me. I didn't have the money. The sheriff, he had people after me. They said they'd bury me alive out there if I didn't pay. I thought she'd forgive me when it was over. I thought. He stopped when I lowered the hammer of the pistol. Sweat slid from his temples. There's forgiveness in death, is that it? I asked quietly. That's the gospel now. Trade your sister's heartbeat for your skin? Cal tried to crawl away toward the back door. I didn't stop him. Let him listen. Let him take the story to what was left of their department. Julian lifted trembling hands. Mason, please. I can make it right. I kept something. Proof, documents, recordings, what the sheriff did before. I can give you everything. He motioned toward a desk drawer. I said nothing. He hesitated, then reached slowly, opened it, and pulled out a flash drive wrapped in tape. He set it on the table, sliding it across the wood like an offering to a god that doesn't listen to prayers anymore. I stared at it. That small piece of plastic. Maybe it held names, accounts, everything. But it didn't hold Tessa's smile. It didn't hold her laugh when she painted and got more on herself than the walls. It's all there, he whispered. Everything. You could ruin them. Mason, you don't have to do this. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the liquor on his breath. The gun hung loose in my grip. I'm not here for ruin. I'm here for truth. He pressed his palms together, desperate now. Then tell me what you want. I looked straight into the eyes that shared my wife's blood and said quietly, I wanted you to have protected her. For a long time, neither of us moved. The rain outside beat against the windows like fists. Then I saw it in his face, that final flicker of realization that there was no coming back from this. He tried to lunge for the gun. The sound was muffled, swallowed by thunder. He hit the floor hard. The chair toppled over beside him. His hand still twitched once before it went still. Kyle screamed and crashed through the back door, running into the rain. I stood over Julian, looking down at the brother who had sold blood like currency. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from exhaustion I didn't realize I could still feel. The flash drive sat on the table, dark and silent. I picked it up, slipped it into my pocket, and walked out. Outside, lightning flashed across the street. I could see the faint glow of approaching sirens, probably the response to the barn fire. I stepped into the shadows behind the diner across the road and didn't look back. In the distance, the hardware sign flickered once more, that same broken hum that mirrored my pulse. I whispered to the rain, 2 down. But this time, it didn't sound like victory. It sounded like surrender. Because somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Grant wasn't finished. The files were dynamite, but his ambition went higher than county lines. And when a man like that gets scared, everyone in his reach starts burning. I had just kicked the door open on something bigger than revenge. And now, I had nothing left to lose. The highway out of town was flooded, glistening under the red-blue pulse of distant sirens. I drove an unmarked pickup stolen from a repair shop, the heavy rain drumming against the windshield like the ticking of a clock running out of seconds. The briefcase from the stash house and the flash drive from Julian's drawer sat on the passenger seat. 2 lifelines, both soaked in blood. Every road in this county fed back to Sheriff Grant. Every deputy, every judge, every news brief, it all came from him. But now his leash was on fire. Julian had bought my family's death for gambling debt, and Grant had delivered it for power. Those tapes, those ledgers, they were his kingdom's foundation, and I was about to pull them out from under his boots. I stopped at a roadside motel 5 miles outside town. Vacancy sign flickering. Half the letters burned out, so it looked like it said Vs_NCY. Fitting. I grabbed a soaked hoodie from the back seat, pulled it over my head, and carried the bag inside. The old man at the counter didn't ask for ID when he saw the cash. He barely looked up from his static blaring TV. People like him didn't want trouble. They lived long that way. I unlocked room 7, pushed open the door, and dropped the gear on the table. Inside smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. A single flicker from the ceiling bulb cast everything in sepia. I turned on the laptop I'd pulled from the hardware store's office last night, Tessa's words still echoing in my head. If anything happens, check what others hide. The flash drive plugged in with a soft click. Folders opened. Names, dates, payments, recordings. Sheriff Grant's voice was everywhere. Extortion calls, drug routes, cover-ups, and payouts. Judges, deputies, even a councilman. Every file was another head of a hydra that thought it would never be caught. The kind of stuff that would make headlines, bring in feds, burn entire careers to dust. But the recording that stopped me cold wasn't about crime. It was about Tessa. Her voice. Afraid, trembling, pleading. You promised, Sheriff. Julian said you wouldn't hurt him. Please, you don't have to do this. Then Grant's. Calm. Cold. The world's full of promises, Mrs. Mason. Some just come with a price. The next sound was the slide of a gun. The recording cut there. I stared at the wall until my chest felt hollow. There was no justice system for this. Even the law had hands soaked in blood. My wife's voice, trapped inside a machine. Proof that the devil wore a badge. I spent the next 3 hours mapping everything. Contacts, addresses, front businesses, shell accounts. All connected to Grant through a web so intricate it had to have military precision. He wasn't a local menace anymore. He was a player in a statewide trafficking chain. Property seizures, evidence that disappeared, missing persons filed and forgotten. When dawn cracked through the window, light mixing with the smoke from my 5th cigarette, I made a list. 11 names. Men who helped bury evidence. Men who sat silent while she died. There would be no court case. There would be no plea bargains. There would only be one long night. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It went straight to a static buzz, then a voice I hadn't heard since my last stop in Kandahar. Ryder. Still alive? I said quietly. Still dirty work out here. He laughed. You sound like a ghost, Mason. What do you need? Gear. Scoped rifle, 2 suppressors, comms jammer, and a truck that can vanish off-grid. Long silence. This about her? Everything is. He didn't ask more. Old teammates don't need explanations. They hear the ghosts in your tone. I'll drop the box in the West Quarry. Midnight. 2 hours tops, he said. No names, no fingerprints. You never called me. Copy that. Before he hung up, his voice dropped low. Grant's people are hunting you. Every channel codes you as armed domestic terror suspect. They want your head before the press learns why. Then they'll have to earn it. The line went dead. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time. I rinsed my hands in the motel's sink. The water ran pink, faint traces of blood from Julian still trapped under my nails. I didn't flinch anymore. You stop flinching when you've already outlived everything you loved. By noon, the rain stopped. I burned the briefcase in a roadside barrel, keeping only 3 documents and the flash drive on a silver lanyard under my shirt. I walked toward town on back roads, cutting through the abandoned rail yard. Every rusted train car echoed like a whisper of what was coming. When the first round cracked past my shoulder, I didn't duck. Reflex had me roll left behind a steel crate. The shooter was sloppy, one of Grant's men, not military. He shouted, "Hands up, Mason. You're surrounded." 2 pairs of footsteps. Maybe 3. Rain puddles gave them away. I waited until one came close enough to check the corner, his shadow breaking across the crate. I caught his wrist, twisted, and buried the knife into his throat before he made a sound. The second fired blind into the dark. I let him waste his mag, then grabbed the fallen rifle. 1 shot. He crumpled. Silence again. I could hear my heart, steady, mechanical. No remorse. Just rhythm. When I stepped out, I took their radios and checked the channel. "This is Unit 2, I said into the mic. My voice lower, rougher. "Rail yard's clear. He's not here." Patch through to the sheriff. Grant's voice crackled through seconds later. "Copy that. Pull back east. Amelia's firm just got raided. She lawyered the wrong guy." "Amelia?" The only one who still believed I was human. I crushed the radio under my boot. The game had changed. Grant was going after anyone who touched my case. If Amelia was still breathing, it wouldn't be for long. I loaded what was left of the rifle's magazine and walked toward the setting sun. The light scattered through the clouds in long, burning streaks, like the last shape of heaven before the dark swallowed it. There was no law now. No procedure, no mission brief, no leash. There was just survival. And this time, survival meant going on offense. The sheriff thought he'd released chaos by letting me walk free. He didn't realize I was the storm itself. Midnight draped over the quarry like a burial shroud. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the only light came from the dull glow of Ryder's truck headlights parked halfway down the slope. I moved fast but quiet, my boots stirring the dust and gravel with every step. Ryder stood there with his hood up, a shadow with a grin you could barely see. Even in the dark, I recognized the way he held himself. Balanced, cautious, every move calculated. "You look like hell," he said, handing me a flight case. "Inside's what you asked for, plus a few surprises." I clicked the latches open. Suppressed AR-15, 2 Glocks, an M110 sniper system, and a small black case labeled Echo. "What's that?" I asked. He smirked. "One-time pulse jammer. You get 60 seconds to make ghosts out of anyone with comms or cams. Then it fries." "Perfect." I nodded. "Appreciate it." Ryder's eyes hardened. "You sure about this, brother? I've seen that look before. You're not coming back from whatever you're about to do." I chambered around, glancing up at him. There's no back to come to. He didn't try to stop me. He just clapped my shoulder once. "Then make it clean. For her." I disappeared into the tree line before the sound of his truck faded completely. By morning, I was in position on the outskirts of the sheriff's private world, the real one, not the one he showed to the cameras. His ranch, for miles from town, wasn't registered under Grant's name. It belonged to Lincoln Enterprises, a shell company buried under 5 fake owners, all tied to the same cartel accounts that paid for Tessa's death. The aerial surveil photos showed multiple buildings, the farmhouse, a detached garage, and a larger structure behind it that looked like a stable but radiated too much power consumption on satellite imagery. Server banks, probably. That's where the records were stored. If I could leak that data, Grant wouldn't just lose his badge. He'd lose his world. But I wasn't the only one hunting. 2 miles out, I found her, Amelia, duct taped to a chair inside an abandoned gas station. I almost missed it until I noticed the cruiser parked sideways outside with no lights on. I crept around the side, peering through the broken blinds. She was bruised, gagged, eyes wide in terror. A deputy's voice floated through the space, nervous, shaken. "Boss said not to rough her up too bad. He wants her for the press thing later. Said, make the SEAL watch her choke on her conscience." My pulse didn't change, but something inside me froze into something sharper. Getting her out would blow my timeline, but leaving her meant feeding Grant's performance. I unscrewed the suppressor and went in through the back door. The first deputy didn't even hear me. One arm across his mouth, one twist, neck snapped clean. The second saw a shadow, blinked twice, and then nothing. His head hit the counter before his partner's body hit the floor. I untied Amelia. She gasped through the tape. "Mason, no. No, you have to go. They're waiting for you there. Grant knows you'll come for him." "I'm counting on it," I said, cutting the last tie from her wrist. "You still have those case contacts? The journalist in the city?" She nodded weakly. "Good. When I send you what's on Drive 1, you send it to every channel, every feed, every inbox. He loses the shield, the badge, everything. Understand?" Her voice cracked. "And you?" "I finished this." She reached out, grabbed my wrist before I could move. "Mason, what's left after this?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Nothing. That's the point." I left her a car and my backup phone and vanished before her engine started. By late afternoon, the sun cut through the clouds again, and the ranch came into view through my scope. 2 cars out front. One white, one black, luxury sedans with tinted windows. Not deputies. Out-of-town muscle. Grant was calling in backups from the network, cartel connected. He was scared now. Fear makes men like him rash. That's why I lit up the outskirts. 3 low-charge C4 patches wired to diesel barrels on the service road. Just enough to panic, not enough to kill. When the first car tried to pull out, it detonated, shaking the hill. The guards rushed to the perimeter. I slipped through the backside of the fence. No noise, no spotlight. The farmhouse door was unlocked. Confidence really is a poison. Inside smelled like cigars and rot. Papers everywhere. Gun cabinets, trophy heads on the wall. On his desk, a picture of him shaking hands with the governor. Fake smiles covering the rot beneath. I found the server room behind a false cabinet in the study. He'd converted an entire basement into data storage. Hundreds of terabytes of blackmail, recordings, contacts. All protected behind 2 biometric locks. I pressed the side of the Echo device on the central control pad. The red light blinked, then turned green. 60 seconds. I copied everything, fast. Lines of code flickered across the laptop as the files transferred. Corruption logs, payroll ledgers, recorded calls. At 58 seconds, the drive finished and the jammer fried the power grid, plunging the ranch into blackout. Perfect timing, except for the footsteps above me. Heavy, slow. Then the creak of the basement door. Sheriff Grant's voice echoed down. Calm. Controlled. You made it all the way home, sailor. Guess even SEALs can't resist finishing the mission. My gun rose, trained on the steps. Grant chuckled, lighting something, a flare. The glow painted his face in red as he descended. Problem is, Mason, war's in with soldiers dying or obeying. You didn't learn how to do either. He stepped into the open, a shotgun dangling casually in one hand. Now what? You shoot me, or you let the house burn? He smiled again, that same dead grin from the highway. Did you really think I'd just wait for you to come? He raised the flare and pointed it toward the floor above. This ranch, it's wired to burn too, just like your little safe house. Every step you've taken since that night, I planned it. The smell of gasoline hit before I saw the smoke curling from the ceiling boards. He had turned it all into a trap. The flames licked down the stairs while the hard drives whined behind me, still humming with her voice recorded inside. Grant laughed, backing up, flare still lit. What's it gonna be, soldier? Proof or vengeance? I holstered the rifle, looked him dead in the eyes, and walked straight through the fire toward him. Both. He fired. The shot hit empty air. Smoke swallowed his grin. Flames roared around us, swallowing the wooden walls inch by inch. Every breath was smoke. The air burned the lungs raw, but the sound of Grant's shotgun drowned out everything. The low thunder of shells racking, the click of boots through embers. He'd missed his first shot, but he wouldn't miss again. I dropped behind a support beam, heart steady, timing his reloads by instinct. Every movement had rhythm. Chamber, breath, cock. Predictable. He laughed between shots. I've read about you, Mason. The Navy calls guys like you ghosts. You know what I call you. He stepped over a beam crackling with fire, the orange light eating his outline. A man who couldn't protect his own family. And ghosts don't scare me. He fired another shell through the wall. Shards of wood bit my cheek. I tore a fragment of burning curtain from the wall and tossed it toward a stack of ammo cases. The pop of igniting rounds answered a heartbeat later. The explosion sent Grant stumbling, shielding his face. The smoke worked in my favor. I lunged from cover. The butt of my pistol cracked across his jaw, sending the shotgun flying. He swung a fist wild, too slow. I slammed his head into the wall once, twice, until plaster rained down around us. His hand came up with a hidden knife, grazing my side. The heat and pain flared, sharp, wet, but I didn't stop. I knocked the blade loose, grabbed his arm, twisted it until I felt the bone strain. He roared in pain. I hit him again, pinning him under my knee. The flares still glowed in the corner, lighting his face. The same twisted smirk from that night under the storm. You think this fixes anything? He coughed, blood flecking his teeth. You kill me, and 10 more wear my badge tomorrow. Corruption's a hydra, Mason. You cut one head, 10 grow back. I'm not cutting heads, I said quietly. I'm burning the body. I shoved the flash drive down the front of his vest pocket. He looked confused. You like burying secrets, I said. Now you carry them. He tried to grab my wrist, and I backhanded him across the mouth. This isn't for justice, Grant. You lost that word the night you pulled the trigger. This is a reminder. Some evils don't vanish with the badge. They vanish with the bloodline. He snarled, blood mixing with spit. You think they'll hail you as a hero? You're gonna die right here, same as her. Maybe, I said. But you'll go first. I pressed my pistol to his stomach and fired once. The sound cracked harder than thunder beneath the fire. He jerked, gasped, eyes wild. I left him there gasping on the burning floorboards, the fire crawling up his boots. Then I ran. Up the stairs, through black pillars of smoke. I burst through the shattered window and rolled into the mud outside. The impact drove the breath out of me. I looked back. The building was collapsing in on itself, flames licking the night sky like a beacon. If hell had an address, this place just got tagged. From the other side of the field, headlights appeared. A convoy of police cruisers and tactical SUVs roaring toward the ranch. Dozens of red and blue flashes cut through the smoke. They were here sooner than I expected. Someone had called them before Grant set the fire. Maybe Amelia. Maybe Ryder. Maybe fate. I ran for cover behind a fence post, gripping my side wound. Blood seeped through my palm, hot and thick. I couldn't fight an army. But I didn't have to, just control the chaos. I pulled out the detonator Ryder had tracked to my belt earlier, the final gift. 2 clicks armed everything left on the road. Fuel drums, propane lines, and a fuse tied to the stable's foundation charge. All linked, already. The first SWAT van screeched to a stop at the gate. Men poured out with flashlights and rifles raised. A voice amplified through a megaphone. Navy SEAL Mason, you are under arrest. Drop your weapons and come out with your hands visible. I smiled in the dark. No more speeches. No more orders. They thought I was still fighting to live. They didn't understand. I'd been dead since the 9th shot. I pushed the button. The world fractured in a bloom of sound and light. Fire swallowed everything. The cruisers, the porch, the roof, even the badge that started it all. The explosion lifted the ground like an earthquake. I hit the dirt again, debris raining down around me. Through the ringing in my ears, through the cinders drifting from the sky, I could hear one sound above all else. Grant's screams fading into the inferno. And under that, somewhere deeper, something else. Her voice in the static, soft, far away, maybe just memory. Come home. I crawled toward the outer fence, lungs fighting for oxygen. The blaze behind me wasn't fire anymore, it was release. By the time I reached the drainage ditch beyond the ridge, my body was failing. Vision tunneling, chest tight, blood dripping into the mud. I kept crawling, not for revenge anymore, but for the promise I made in that hospital bed. They shouldn't have left me breathing. Now they hadn't. I pulled myself onto the dirt road just as a pair of tires screeched to a stop beside me. A door flew open. Amelia's face stared down, pale and ash-covered. Oh God, she gasped, hauling me toward the truck. Mason, stay with me. Please stay awake. I coughed out a half-laugh, half-choke. He's gone. She pressed a hand to my chest to stop the bleeding. Then it's over. I shook my head weakly. Not yet. Drive. Behind us, the fire raged brighter, and through the rear window, the night sky turned the color of vengeance. Every secret he kept, every sin he buried, was turning to ash inside that house. But I knew Grant wasn't working alone. That ledger didn't end with him. It started with the governor's office. As the truck jolted down the dirt path, headlights slicing the fog, I let my head fall back against the seat and muttered the same word that had started this all. Tessa. Her name left my lips like prayer, smoke, and promise all at once. And somewhere beyond the flames, Something deeper than revenge still waited to be done. The sirens were still echoing when Amelia's truck tore down the back road, headlights carving through mist and ash. My side burned. Every bump sent knives through my ribs, but I stayed awake by force. The fire behind us looked like a second sunrise, one built of rage. Amelia kept glancing over, voice tight and trembling. "You need a hospital, now." I shook my head, blood staining my shirt darker. "No hospitals. They'll flag it. Grant's men still have friends on the inside." She looked at me like she wanted to slap sense into my skull. "Then what, Mason? You just bleed out in my seat after all that? You're not done. You said this wasn't over." "It's not," I muttered, pulling the flash drive from under my shirt. "He wasn't operating alone." She glanced at it, confused. "Who?" "The governor," I said quietly, watching the drive glint in the dashboard light. "His signature's buried in these files. Grant was just protecting him." The words burned coming out. I'd lost count of how many systems I'd torn down overseas for less corruption than what was running my home. She stared at the road, silent. I could see her jaw tighten. "So you're planning to expose the governor?" I didn't answer right away. The wind howled through the broken window glass, carrying the smell of wet earth and smoke. "I'm planning," I said, "to finish what she started." An hour later, Amelia pulled off into an old quarry tunnel, the one that hadn't been used since the mine collapsed 10 years ago. Ryder was waiting by a barrel fire, pulling a tarp off a black SUV loaded with gear. "So you made it," Ryder said, voice flat. "And from the looks of it, you made the sun rise early back there." Amelia got out and slammed the door. "He needs medical attention, Ryder." He shrugged, pulling a medic bag from the trunk. "When didn't he?" "Sit down, brother." I ignored the pain while he stapled the side wound closed, wrapped it, and handed me a morphine injector I refused. "Keep your head clear," I said. "You won't stay clear long if you bleed like this," Amelia snapped. Her anger wasn't fear, it was grief disguised as fury. Too familiar. Ryder lit a cigarette. I heard chatter. "Feds are inbound for Grant's case. You dropped enough breadcrumbs to feed an army." "Then I've got one last breadcrumb," I said, holding up the flash drive. Amelia frowned. "If you send this to the press, you'll start a storm. They'll tear the state apart. Maybe worse." "That's the plan," I said. Ryder's eyes flicked to me. "You sure? If you do this, you go from ghost to terrorist in the headlines. They'll never let you just vanish." I strapped on a vest, ignoring the ache in my ribs. "Let them try and find me." The three of us drove through the early hours, clouds still spitting drizzle across the windshield. The world smelled like burnt rain and diesel. The city skyline eventually blinked into view, tall buildings jutting like knives into fog. Amelia guided the SUV into a side alley near the government district. "The governor's press event starts in 20 minutes, she said. "He's announcing a corruption task force." Irony of the century. "Perfect timing," I said. "Means all the cameras are already rolling." I unbuckled, checked my pistol, then handed the flash drive to her. "When I go inside, plug this into any terminal tied to the live feed. It'll dump everything across every network connected to that station. State databases, press servers, broadcast lines. Once it starts, don't stop it." She hesitated. "And you?" I looked straight ahead. "I've got one promise left to keep." The governor's mansion was crawling with security, but uniformed cops were too distracted by the morning chaos. News alerts blaring about an unknown suspect setting fire to the Sheridan County ranch. They didn't realize the suspect was on their doorstep. Ryder peeled off and parked 3 blocks down. I walked the rest of the way. Each step was heavy, not from the wound, but from everything it carried. As I approached the rear service entrance, one of the security guards stepped forward, saying something through his headset. I barely heard. A short, sharp takedown, knife disarm, twist drop. He went quiet before he hit the floor. I slipped through the door, heart rate steady. The mansion's back hallways gleamed like new money, marble floors polished enough to reflect your sins back at you. Voices echoed beyond the atrium, reporters, flashes, camera shutters. And him, Governor Preston Clay. He stepped onto the stage, perfect suit, perfect smile, every syllable rehearsed. Today, we stand united against corruption. The words cut off as the side doors slammed open. Gasps rippled through the press room. Every camera swung toward me like turrets. My clothes were dark, soaked in blood and smoke. I carried no gun in my hand, just the badge I took off Grant's body. It was blackened and bent, nearly melted to slag. "Ask him," I said into the silence, my voice echoing through the mic feedback. "Ask him where the money went. Ask him who signed off on the sheriff's budget extensions. Ask him who Grant was protecting." Security swarmed toward the stage. I tossed the badge onto the podium. It clinked right in front of the governor's script. "That's your legacy," I said. "Corruption wearing a uniform." Cameras were firing like lightning now. Behind me, I heard Amelia's distant voice through an earpiece she slipped into my pocket earlier. "It's uploading." "He's live." The screen behind the governor flickered, then filled with faces. Grant's recordings, Julian's deal, the bribes, the voice of Tessa pleading for mercy. Every awful truth screaming across 50 news networks. Clay's expression twisted, from denial to horror. The smile that won elections melted away on live television. Then chaos. Security grabbed me, slammed me to the floor, shoved knees into my back. But they didn't cut the cameras. Not yet. The whole country was watching. Through the choke of blurred lights, I looked up once more at the screen where Tessa's voice was still whispering. "Please, you don't have to do this." I smiled weakly. He didn't have to. I did. They dragged me out in cuffs, flashes still blinding. Behind me, reporters roared questions, names, motives, justice. And for once, the truth had already answered them. In the back of the SUV, Amelia caught my eyes as they pushed me inside. She mouthed, "It worked." For the first time since that night on the highway, I felt something close to peace. Justice was ugly and loud, but at least it breathed. As they drove me past the courthouse steps, I saw the governor's face on every screen, every headline spelling his downfall. The smile was gone. Forever. The world didn't end with a gunfight. It ended with silence. The kind that follows after everything you've loved, lost, and burned to ashes. 3 months had passed since the day I dragged the governor's sins into the daylight. The video was still everywhere, on news loops, blogs, forums. Navy SEAL turns whistleblower vigilante. That's what they called me. A monster to some, a hero to others. To me, just a man who kept a promise too late. Grant's department was gone. Half the state officials stood trial. The governor resigned before the hearings began. Amelia's name was carried across news networks. The courageous lawyer who defied corruption. She deserved it. She saved me when I didn't deserve saving. But Mason Evans? He didn't exist anymore. I vanished the night they moved me between jurisdictions. A vehicle accident, they said. A bridge collapse. Another ghost story buried under paperwork. Now, I live where the sun rises quiet, some nameless coastal village far from the smell of smoke. The air here tastes like ocean and regret. No medals, no revenge fantasies. Just one man checking his scars and wondering what comes next when justice finally runs out of enemies. Every morning, I stand at the shoreline, watching the horizon blur gold against gray water. Some days it looks like that highway in the rain where she died. I hear her voice sometimes, faint in the surf. "Tessa, you'd laugh at me now. You'd tell me it's okay to stop fighting shadows." I whisper back. I try to make it right. Maybe that's all revenge ever is, an echo turned into peace. Amelia sends letters sometimes. She says the files I released inspired new investigations, young officers cleaning departments from within. Ryder keeps his distance, but sometimes I catch him watching from the cliffs, a cigarette glowing like a lighthouse signal between storms. The world keeps turning. Maybe that's penance enough. I reach into my pocket and pull out the photo I salvaged from the ruins that night. Tessa is standing by the crib, her hands on her stomach, half smiling at something off camera. The edges are singed, the colors faded, but her eyes are still alive. Tonight, I bury it beneath the sand, not out of forgetting, but because it's the only way she can rest. The waves touch the shore softly, almost like a goodbye. And for the first time in forever, I whisper back, "You can rest now, love. It's done." I walk away without looking back. The tide takes the photo, the footprints, and everything else that once defined me. Somewhere across the ocean, a storm is forming again. Maybe it's meant for another man like me. Maybe not. But when it comes, I hope he fights smarter. Because revenge doesn't heal. It just buys time for the living to remember. Before you go, let me ask you something. Was justice worth the price he paid? Tell me what you think in the comments below. And also, from where in the world are you watching tonight? If this story hit your heart, show it some love, drop a like, subscribe, and join our growing family of true thriller lovers. I'll keep bringing you more unforgettable tales of betrayal, redemption, and quiet revenge, the kind that keeps you thinking long after the story fades to black. Till the next epic story, stay safe, stay sharp, and take care of your heart. We'll meet again soon, right here,